Studies, training, all these years of mastering the arts, following in the steps of my mentor. I shall not disappoint him. Arcane is the truest of magics. The fate of the world doesn't rest in only one man's hands, but in everyone's. Go, champions! Claim this victory for Azeroth! But do not forget your talents, essences, corruption, your rotation, and much more, because knowledge is power. This video is sponsored by WoW Apparel, our merch store. It's official. Jokes aside, we have some pretty cool hand-drawn designs for t-shirts, hoodies, and more, and you can take a peek on the Teespring link down below. International shipping included, guaranteed corruptions with the first purchase. The first talent here will bring you Rule of Threes. This option makes your Arcane Blast or Arcane Missiles free after you've got your third Arcane Charge. There's nothing complicated here. This is the strongest single target damage option on the row. Also, since in AoE you want to spam Arcane Barrages as much as possible, having the most expensive Arcane Blast be free gives you more overall mana, and the rule applies to single target as well, even if you don't reset the charges. More mana, more damage. Simple. Next up we have Mobility, and there are two viable options. Shimmer is a staple for mages nowadays, where you get a second charge of Blink and you can cast while casting other stuff. Very useful. Slipstream is the other option, making your Arcane Missiles with the clear casting proc be castable while moving. The one you go for will be usually based on your personal preference. Slipstream feels the best for me for Arcane, since your casts are very short and you have a bunch of instants as well, so Shimmer doesn't really get the value it would get with Frost or Fire, in my opinion. But hey, play with both and see what you like. For the third row, you have two options once again. Rune of Power is the ideal one for the most damage output on paper. It implies you having to not move out of its range, which is a bit restrictive, sure, but does suffer less from this downfall in raids. In dungeons where movement is more intense, Encounter's Flow will perform better. Is not too far behind Rune in terms of damage potential, and does offer you the freedom of not being pinned down in one spot. Fourth tier brings again two options, and this is freaking hilarious that Arcane has more build options than Fire, but a recurring BFA trend as far as I can see. Charged Up will be your single target option here. It instantly gives you 4 charges, which comes in handy and adds 25% more buttons for you to press during your rotation. Haha! It will most likely be your default raid option as well. For cleave situations and dungeons almost exclusively, take Resonance. This will boost your Arcane Barrage damage by quite a bit, giving you surprisingly nice AoE damage. Next up, some utility. Chrono Shift is usually the best in all scenarios, usually. Arcane Barrage slows targets and gives you a sprint as well. The slow can easily work really well when you want to control adds in both raids and dungeons, while the mini sprint can help you with mobility, so a lot of uses here. Ice Ward can be an alternative if you are playing with high amounts of corruption and you need to deal with things from beyond. A second Frost Nova charge goes a long way in keeping you safe. Has uses outside of this, of course, but remember that damage will break the Nova, which is why Chrono Shift has seen more plays up until 8.3. Row number 6. I mean sex. What? That's German for 6, you pervs. Touch of the Magi will be your single target option here. This essentially debuffs your target, storing damage for 8 seconds and exploding at the end, dealing AoE damage. That aside, this provides the most single target damage at the moment. For AoE, however, take Reverberate. It ends up in more AoE damage in the end and changes your AoE playstyle into a complex set of skills placed in an intricate rotation. You'll have to Arcane Explosion first, then second, then third. Yeah, Blizzard didn't pull any muscles designing Arcane rotation in this expansion. But hey, if it works, it doesn't. Lastly, on the 7th row, take Overpowered. This will make your Arcane power cooldown even stronger. It gives you a very strong burst window for 10 seconds. Not much else to add, to be honest. In AoE, mostly seen in dungeons, take Arcane Orb. This generates one charge when you cast it and another charge each time it deals damage. It adds some flavor to your AoE rotation. A much needed flavor. And also has the best output in AoE here. You might have noticed that most talents have been separated into either single target or AoE. You can use either of these two builds in both raids and dungeons, but just remember you would be sacrificing either AoE damage or single target damage depending on which one of these two you pick, which is kind of like the biggest drawback of Arcane. Especially on the last row, Overpowered can also work decent in AoE, so could be taken in conjunction with other AoE talents if you are doing mythic keys. When choosing secondary stats, it's ideal for you to sim, especially with so many layers of power added this expansion that makes it so not straightforward to understand what the best is sometimes. Fortunately for Arcane, crit followed by versatility and haste seems to be the best at the moment. Since Arcane is a bit behind other specs, having damage proc corruptions can help, and damage proc corruptions can sometimes gain nothing from haste and almost always absolutely nothing from mastery. As such, aim for crit-oriented consumables such as a Cord of Critical Strike and Deadly Lava Lazuli with one socket that should be kept for Leviathan's Eye of Intellect. Keep in mind that corruptions with a percent stat increase can skew this, but if that stat is not crit or verse, you should probably sim it. Get the Torrent of Elements for the weapon, always a solid choice here, and of course, the Greater Flask of Endless Fathoms and Superior Battle Potion of Intellect for your intellect needs. As for the food, feasts or McDowell's burgers should do you just fine. One note here about haste. There are actually a few breakpoints for haste where you can squeeze in one extra cast of Arcane Blast during Arcane Power. If you can get these breakpoints, haste will be a better option, but only in those situations. First breakpoint is at 8% for the extra Arcane Blast. The next breakpoint is 13.38 inside Time Warp for one more blast, 22.5% outside Time Warp for that same one more blast. These breakpoints are very specific and do not factor in lag and delay in rotation, so keep that in mind. Similar to the talents, the Azurite traits come in two more or less defined builds. Keep in mind the raid gives you your main traits plus Heart of Darkness mandatory on almost all pieces, and the last two bosses drop them at 10 higher eye levels than normal. Aim for Equipoise stacked 3 times for raids and general single target damage output with as many Hearts of Darkness stacked as you can manage. This should be your ideal setup if you can proc the Heart of Darkness effect, obviously. You can opt for one Galvanizing Spark or one Arcane Pummeling instead of the ones mentioned if you are missing them. These last two are good only to have one of each since you really want their procs and not their flat damage increase. You can potentially get the best pieces from Skitra, Carapace and N'Zoth. For AoE and in dungeons mostly, you want Arcane Pressure stacked 3 times. Have one Explosive Echo, kind of mandatory, and fill in with the rest with Heart of Darknesses. The major trade-off of Arcane and one of the weaknesses of the spec in 8.3, as with 8.2 as well, is that you can only have either really good single target damage or really good AoE and not both. These two builds excel at what they aim to do, and you can take either one into raids and dungeons since both content types have at least one instance where they could benefit from the other's damage profile. When raiding, as major essences, you want either Whirlvein Resonance for the massive intellect buff or Condensed Life Force for the raw damage output. These can perform great in their own right. For miners, Conflict and Strife still gives a massive versatility buff that pretty much is up all the time. Formless Void is an amazing raid option where everybody just pops their essences all the damn time, giving you a very high uptime on the intellect buff. Breath of the Dying, as the last option, adds a lot of raw damage that outclasses most other options. One thing to note here, if your neck is at a very high level, think 84-ish, you can run Vision of Perfection Minor if you also have the Whirlvein Resonance Major. This will reduce the cooldown of your arcane power to almost 1 minute, making it align really well with Whirlvein. Just a thought, but that might desync it with unused Trinkets, so, you know, take your pick. In dungeons, you have more major options, but two of the best are either Focusing Iris, pretty straightforward meme beam for burst damage, or Blood of the Enemy, which synergizes well with Arcane Power for some massive AoE burst. As for the minors, Conflict and Strife and Breath of the Dying are very solid picks also. With Blood of the Enemy, if you haven't selected it as a major already, or Memory of Lucid Dreams instead, seems to perform well for the top Arcane Mages. Again, all of this can be tested and simmed since each character is different and it actually matters how you approach each pack or what the route is. Websites like bloodmallet.com and herodamage.com maintain a good representation of the best performing trinkets for Arcane, which you can check. Generally, you want an unused trinket to be paired up with Arcane Power, and the unquestionably best one right now is Manifesto of Madness. This can be harder to get, so any unused trinket with a cooldown matching Arcane Power should work just fine. Psyche Shredder is a good passive trinket to go along with your unused option, and is a really good damage output, come on. Easier to get if you are raiding, because it comes from Skitrath, second or third boss. Otherwise, Conch of Dark Whispers and Vita Charge Titan Shard are very common trinkets. Crit is top, clearly, while the Titan Shard is a trinket that a lot of people are making groups for to get, so chances are you can farm it easily if you haven't looted it already with your guild. There are only two corrupted weapons you can loot from the raid, and the Shaglaeos from Carapace is the only noteworthy here, since it comes with the Infinite Stars rank 2 corruption. Infinite Stars is mathematically the best damage you can get, but can be pretty expensive and doesn't work too great with more targets that can essentially steal stacking debuffs from your priority targets, aka the boss. With that being said, Gushing Wound and the Twisted Appendage can be some of your top picks. Wound has the most damage per point of corruption, so best for its cost, while the Appendage scales with crit and versatility, your top two stats, making it stronger than on other specs in the game. Outside of these, you can aim for raw stat increases like Severe, Versatile, and Void Ritual, ideally at rank 3. These are also cheaper, more often looted, and as such easily stackable. When opening on a boss, pre-pot and pre-cast Arcane Blast. Use Charged Up next, cast Rune of Power, cast Arcane Power, and begin the burn phase. The burn phase essentially is you casting as many Arcane Blasts at 4 charges as possible while consuming the clear casting procs with Arcane Missiles. Once you are out of mana, Evocation should get you back up. While running overpowered, your burn phase should start with at least 30% mana remaining or 60% without the talent. While outside Arcane Power, you want to stay in the Conserve phase, which is at 60% mana or 80% mana with the Equipoise trait. To do that, you will use Arcane Barrage at 4 Arcane charges to reset the mana cost of your blasts, rinse and repeat. As far as the Presence of Mind is concerned, you really only want to use it at the end of Arcane Power, with 3 seconds remaining, giving you 2 instant Arcane Blasts. As far as ability priority is concerned, use Charged Up when you are at 2 or fewer charges. Don't cap on Rune of Power, but save a charge for your burn phase. Use Arcane Power on cooldown. Consume clear casting procs on missiles. And cast Arcane Blast as the lowest priority ability, but still the highest damage. In AoE, you build up to 3 charges with Arcane Explosion, then use 1 Arcane Blast for the Rule of Threes talent, and then Arcane Barrage. Use Arcane Orb after Barrage for instant charges. The burn phase and the conserve phases are similar since you want to always consume charges with Barrage in AoE and build them up with Arcane Explosion, keeping in mind the condition mentioned before. When conserving mana, try to stay at around 40% in AoE. There is always room to improve with any spec in the game, and we recommend you check the Alter Time Discord and the online written guides for more in-depth info on the spec. A big shout out to Dorvan once again, who helped us with some feedback and clarifications for the guide. You rock, dude. Major thanks to our patrons who make a lot of this possible through their contributions. We love and appreciate you guys. You also rock. If you want to check our Patreon page and support us a little bit more with some goodies there as well, links are down in the description. Thanks for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.